have another egregious action from Joe Biden that you're not going to hear about if you turn on CNN or MSNBC or even Fox News. Huffington Post is reporting that Biden's DOJ is using this is their term, this is their word, not mine. Biden's DOJ is using a ridiculous argument to defend a controversial Trump-era arms deal. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are both accused of human rights abuses, you don't say, but Biden seems to believe that that should only matter for the Saudis. So they go on to explain that there was about $800 million worth of bombs that were going to be sold to Saudi Arabia, and Joe Biden suspended the sale of those bombs. Okay, that's good, right? Well, get this. After President Joe Biden quietly okayed Donald Trump's largest arms deal earlier this year, the Biden administration is now defending it in court using ludicrous logic. That it's unfair to suggest the United Arab Emirates will misuse American weapons just because it has repeatedly done so for years. So there's a $23 billion weapons deal between the US and the UAE. And Joe Biden is saying, on that weapons deal, green light, all systems go. And you can't say that they're going to use those weapons for bad stuff, because just because they used it for bad stuff in the past doesn't mean they're going to do it again in the future. Beyond absurd. Beyond absurd. So, I mean, this is... Well, let me give you a little bit more so you understand the full context here. There are several groups that are suing the State Department now in federal court over this. And the coalition includes relatives of more than 50 people killed by UAE military actions in Libya. So the UAE intervened in Libya. Family members of people who the UAE killed are suing, saying, don't give them any more weapons. They say, including an attack that U.S. intelligence blamed on the Emiratis not long before Trump offered them the package of fighter jets, drones, and bombs. So Trump was watching them commit war crimes, and he's like, my kind of guys, let me give you some more fighter jets, drones, and bombs. Also, by the way, the UAE is directly involved in the genocide in Yemen. They have armed Sunni fundamentalist militias on the ground. So this is what's going on. This is what's going on with our allies. This is who we're in bed with. And listen, I mean, the point to make is obvious. Joe Biden on the campaign trail, and credit to this article in Huffington Post because they give like direct quotes, things he said when he was campaigning. He's just a complete liar and a complete fraud. He acted like, we're going to bring decency and human rights and justice back to the White House. And of course, he's just quietly but aggressively trying to continue a lot of Trump's foreign policy agenda and arming all of these terrible, authoritarian, theocratic dictators. So, you tell me who's really in charge in Washington. I submit to you, Joe Biden, whether it's a Democratic president or a Republican president or senators of either party or congresspeople of either party, most of the people who are there in D.C. are in a swamp, and they are corrupt, and they are doing the bidding of the military-industrial complex. They are doing the bidding of Wall Street. They are doing the bidding of various multinational corporations that have their tentacles wrapped around all of D.C. So, because understand something, there's no logical argument you can give for this position. There's no moral or ethical argument you can give for this position. It's a duh. It's a layup. It's a no-brainer that you don't arm theocratic, authoritarian dictators. You don't do that. But Joe Biden tries to have his cake and eat it too and pretend like I've brought decency back to the White House while he continues a lot of the Trump agenda. Listen, I'm going to give credit where it's due. So he didn't sell the $800 million worth of bombs to Saudi Arabia, but I'm sure there are loopholes in that too, where he'll find ways to still get them, what they want, some roundabout way, right? I mean, we learned a couple weeks ago that you had some of the top Saudi officials had a secret meeting in D.C. with Biden. Biden wanted to hide the fact that he was meeting with these people because he knows the perception. He knows that since they murdered Khashoggi and fucking got away with it, that they're not in high regard among the U.S. public and among reasonable, common sense people. So they hid that. I'm sure they're working on some sort of loophole, but hey, $800 million worth of bombs suspended to Saudi Arabia, great. But arming UAE and pretending like, no big deal, bro. If they kill civilians, if they intervene in Libya, if they partake in the genocide in Yemen, if they arm Sunni fundamentalist militias on the ground. It is what it is, bro. And then understand, guys, how many times has this happened? Whether it's under Reagan, whether it was under Obama, how many times has the U.S. armed Sunni fundamentalist groups and then, it's the Mujahideen and they become the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and then they turn those guns on us and we're like, ooh, I couldn't see this coming. Who knew that arming jihadists would backfire? I mean, it's a joke. It's a joke. It's all a joke. I mean, 16 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 were from Saudi Arabia, and then we invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. And we're still in there. I'm still in Iraq, and only partially withdrawing as of right now from Afghanistan. And then you got guys like John Bolton saying, well, we have to protect ourselves, so we got to keep going back in there. So why are you not advocating invading Saudi Arabia if you're such a tough guy who wants to stand up against America's enemies? They're the ones who are arming and funding and propping up and spreading radical Islam all around the world. But they get a pass because they're our oil buddy, they're our business buddy, they get our weapons. We're in a strategic alliance with them. The hypocrisy runs so deep. They don't care about human rights, and they've made it really, really obvious.